Thomas Bennett was coming home from his evening shift at the hospital when he saw her, a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, sitting on the steps of the closed coffee shop 2 blocks from his apartment. Her dark hair hung in damp strands around her face, and even in the dim streetlight he could see she was crying. At 38, Thomas had worked as a nurse for 15 years. He'd learned to recognize when someone was in genuine distress versus someone looking for a handout. This girl, and she looked so young despite her obvious exhaustion, was clearly in the first category. His 10-year-old son Marcus would be asleep by now, watched over by Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who helped with childcare in exchange for Thomas fixing things around her apartment. Thomas could easily walk past, mind his own business, get home to his quiet evening routine. Instead, he found himself approaching slowly, his hands visible, his voice gentle. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The young woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were intelligent eyes, alert despite her obvious distress. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, starting to gather the small backpack beside her. "I wasn't bothering anyone. I'll move along." "You're not bothering anyone," Thomas said quietly, "but you look like you might need help. Are you hurt? Do you have somewhere safe to go?" The girl, she introduced herself as Sophie, hesitated for a long moment before shaking her head. "Not really. I've been staying at shelters when there's space, but they're full tonight." Thomas studied her face. No signs of drug use, no smell of alcohol, just exhaustion and fear and the kind of defeat that came from having nowhere to turn. "Look," he said, making a decision that surprised even him. "I have a small apartment with a couch. My son and I don't have much, but we have a roof and it's safe. You can stay the night if you need to." Sophie stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. You don't even know me. Why would you offer that?" "Because someone did the same for me once," Thomas said simply. "When Marcus was 3 and I was between jobs, a stranger let us sleep in their garage for a week." Sometimes that's how the world works. We help each other when we can. Sophie's apartment, Thomas's apartment now, he corrected himself, was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, furniture that was clearly second-hand but well cared for. Photos of Thomas and a boy with his same kind smile lined the mantel. "That's Marcus," Thomas explained, seeing her looking. "He's 10. Lost his mom when he was 5, so it's just been the 2 of us since then." "I'm sorry," Sophie said softly. "Thank you. We're doing okay. Better than okay, actually." Thomas pulled blankets from a closet. "The couch isn't luxurious, but it's comfortable. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. And the bathroom's down the hall." As Thomas set up the couch for her, Sophie watched this stranger who had invited her into his home without asking for anything in return. She couldn't remember the last time someone had shown her kindness without wanting something back. "Thomas," she said quietly. "Thank you. I know this is unusual, taking in someone you don't know." "We're all just people trying to get through life," Thomas replied. "Sometimes we need help, sometimes we can offer it. Tonight, you need it, and I can offer it." Over the next few days, Sophie found herself settling into an unexpected routine. She helped with breakfast while Thomas got Marcus ready for school. She kept the apartment tidy while they were gone, and she had dinner waiting when they returned in the evenings. Marcus, after initial shyness, had warmed to her immediately. Sophie helped with his homework, played board games with him, and listened to his stories about school with genuine interest. "Sophie's really smart, Dad," Marcus announced one evening. "She helped me understand fractions better than Mrs. Peterson does." Thomas watched Sophie blush at the compliment and wondered not for the first time about her story. She was clearly educated, well-spoken, and despite her circumstances, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke of a different background than most people who ended up homeless. But he didn't pry. Everyone deserved their privacy, their right to share their story when they were ready. What Thomas didn't know was that Sophie Harrison was the daughter of Robert Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global Industries. She'd grown up in penthouses and private schools, summer homes, and exclusive clubs. But she'd also grown up with a father who believed money could solve any problem and control any person. When Sophie had refused to major in business, Robert had threatened to cut off her funding. When she'd chosen social work over corporate internships, he'd actually done it. When she'd started dating someone he deemed unsuitable, a teacher from a working-class family, Robert had issued an ultimatum: break up with David or lose her family entirely. Sophie had chosen love and found herself disowned, cut off from credit cards and bank accounts, with nothing but her pride and a determination to prove she could make it on her own. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months of discovering how quickly money runs out, how few people would hire someone with no real work experience, how cold the world could be when you had no safety net. But here, in Thomas's small apartment, Sophie had found something she'd never had in her father's mansion: genuine kindness without conditions. After 2 weeks, Sophie knew she needed to find her own place. Thomas had never made her feel unwelcome, but she couldn't impose on his generosity forever. "I've been looking at some rooms for rent," she told Thomas one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. "There's a place across town that's affordable. I should be able to manage it once I get a full-time job." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Sophie, you don't have to leave because you think you should. You're not a burden here, Marcus and I. We've enjoyed having you around. Thomas, you've been incredibly kind, but what if it wasn't charity?" Thomas interrupted gently. "What if it was a real arrangement? You pay what you can for rent, help with Marcus when I'm working late shifts, and this becomes your home for as long as you need it?" Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. "You would do that?" "We're already doing it," Thomas pointed out. "We're just making it official." That night, Sophie lay on the couch that had become her bed and thought about the different definitions of wealth she'd learned. Her father's kind: money, power, control over others. And Thomas's kind: time freely given, kindness without expectation, the ability to make someone feel valued simply for who they were. The knock on the door came 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when Thomas was at work and Sophie was helping Marcus with a school project. When Sophie opened the door, her heart stopped. Robert Harrison stood in the hallway, flanked by his assistant and looking like he owned the building. "Hello, Sophie," he said, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of disappointment and authority. "I think we need to talk. How did you find me?" Sophie asked, not inviting him in. "You're my daughter. Did you think I wouldn't have you followed?" Robert's eyes swept over the modest apartment behind her. "Sophie, enough of this nonsense. You've made your point. Come home. Who's at the door, Sophie?" Marcus called from the kitchen table where his science project was spread out. Robert's eyebrows rose. "You're living with a child?" "I'm living with a family," Sophie said firmly. "People who care about me without trying to control me." "Sophie, be reasonable. You're living in this," Robert gestured dismissively, "when you could have everything. Your trust fund is waiting. Your position at the company. All you have to do is come home and stop this ridiculous rebellion." "It's not a rebellion, Dad. It's a choice. I've learned what it means to truly care about people, to be cared about for who I am rather than what I can provide. I've learned the difference between being needed and being valued." Robert's expression hardened. "And what happens when your little fantasy ends? When these people realize who you really are and what you're worth, you think they won't want something from you then?" Before Sophie could answer, she heard Thomas's key in the lock. He stepped inside, still in his scrubs from his hospital shift, and took in the scene immediately. "Sophie, is everything all right?" Robert turned to study this man who had taken his daughter in, clearly expecting to see someone looking to profit from the situation. Instead, he saw Thomas's immediate concern for Sophie, the protective way he positioned himself, and Marcus running to hug Sophie's waist while asking if the fancy man was bothering her. "Thomas." "Marcus, this is my father," Sophie said quietly. "Dad, this is Thomas Bennett and his son Marcus." "They're the family I was telling you about." Thomas extended his hand politely. "Mr. Harrison, Sophie's told us you two had some disagreements." Robert shook the offered hand automatically, his business instincts taking over. "And you are?" "I'm a nurse at Metropolitan Hospital. Sophie's been staying with us for a while." "And what exactly do you want in return for your hospitality?" Robert's voice carried the cynicism of someone who believed everyone had a price. Thomas looked genuinely confused. Want in return? Nothing. Sophie's part of our family now. She helps with Marcus, keeps the place running when I'm working. We take care of each other. Everyone wants something, Mr. Bennett. You're wrong, Marcus piped up, looking at this strange man with the fearless honesty of childhood. Sophie doesn't want anything from us except to help with my homework and make pancakes on Saturday mornings. And we don't want anything from her except for her to be happy and safe. Robert stared at the 10-year-old, then at Thomas, then at Sophie, who was watching this exchange with tears in her eyes. Sophie, Robert said finally, his voice softer than it had been, these people, do they know who you are? What your family is worth? They know I'm Sophie, she replied. That's enough for them. Maybe it should have been enough for you, too. 6 months later, Robert Harrison sat in the same modest apartment, helping Marcus with his science fair project while Sophie and Thomas prepared dinner together. The trust fund remained untouched. Sophie had insisted on making her own way, but the relationship with her father had slowly begun to heal. Robert had learned that his daughter's worth wasn't measured in dollars or status, and Sophie had learned that true wealth came in the form of people who loved you unconditionally. Thomas had gained not just a partner in life, but the understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as people in need of shelter. And Marcus? Marcus had gained a mother figure who read him bedtime stories, helped with homework, and most importantly, had taught him that family isn't just about blood. It's about people who choose to show up for each other every single day. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer someone isn't money or opportunity. Sometimes it's simply a safe place to sleep and the assurance that they matter just as they are. And sometimes when we open our doors to help a stranger, we discover we've been letting family into our lives all along.